presenter is going to be Stephen Bookman from wonderful New York City's Pace University. Stephen, I'm going to turn things over to you. If you'd like to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about your teaching context and some of the work you do. And we'll go until 11:20 and save 10 minutes at the very end for discussion of both of the sessions that we've just heard. Stephen, there you go. Yeah, got it.
Okay. All right, thank you. My name is Steve Bookman. I am from Pace University in New York City. My context is in higher ed, and I'm a little different because most of the classes that we teach at Pace are the same classes as for domestic students. So the biggest difference is that from other universities is we're not remedial. The students actually get credit for these classes. So if they're taking English 201, English 201A would be the ESL section, but they still get the same credit as the students for it. So we just modify the language, go a little slower, but it's the same essential course. So we're a little different in that respect. We're not the English Language Institute. So when I teach 201 and 201A, it's the same syllabus. The only difference is I just modify it slightly for them. So PACE has about 27,000 students. A lot of them are international students, mostly from China. ESL students are mostly from China, and sometimes you feel like you are from China, in China in those classes, because 99% of students are from China. But we have a whole range of students, and what I have done with OER has changed the way I teach. And my journey starts way back in 2012 when I was given a grant to work with remedial students at another college. And at that time, I had no idea what OER was, although I was creating OER. I think most of us have found ourselves in that situation. And what I did was I had created a whole bunch of handouts and didn't do anything with them. I didn't know what to do. Was forced to use a textbook that I didn't want to use, didn't use too much of, and students did not like me for it. So fast forward to 2018, I put in a proposal for a grant for OER, realizing that, oh, I've been doing OER the whole time. And now I put it into a book. So at this point, when I had my book and Charity talked about how she did her book, it was kind of the same approach that I had in some similar ways. I had a month to create it. And then, of course, it was not edited because it took me that whole month to put everything together and to write everything up. So what I did was I had my book, and I actually had my students go edit it as we went through the class, because I didn't have time to edit the book. And since I'm teaching a writing class, it was perfectly good reason to do that at that time. So that's how I got started with OER. Now, I'm going to talk about the process of how I did it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the things you can do. Since Creative Commons license has been talked about in a number of ways already, I'm going to skip that part a little bit. But I will say time is, if you're writing your own textbook, it takes time, a lot of time. It took a lot of years of handouts, a month to write it, and about a semester to go through it with the students. It takes a lot of time. The planning of it is tremendous. What materials do you use? And I'll get into that later. The planning of it takes an immense amount of time because you have to figure what you have to, everything has to be free and accessibly free. It's a lot of creativity. So I used resources that, well, I had to use resources that were either free subscriptions or free without a subscription. And there are 4 choices that everyone has. One is you can combine your own materials with otherwise published materials already that are OER. You can make it clearly your own materials from one published textbook from, say, OpenStax or Perusal, or you could have it from multiple textbooks. And every situation is different. I chose to make my own materials completely. And that was a challenge in itself. It's a rewarding challenge and there are benefits to it, but at the same time, it is a lot more work. So when I considered what I did for OER, I knew it was going to take time and I knew I had to get all my handouts together, but I also knew I had to follow copyright laws. Creative Commons is part of copyright laws, part of the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And I had to make sure everything was copyright compliant. And that takes a lot of time. And again, that's stressed throughout this whole thing. So if I wasn't sure, I asked. I didn't think twice. I didn't assume, I asked because it has to be all free. So that's the one thing I will say is if you're not sure, ask. There's always a point person at your university, or you can always ask a lawyer, a copyright lawyer. Fortunately for me, I've worked with a lot of people with OER on OER teams, so I had some extra knowledge, which helped me out, but I still had to ask some questions about, is it something legal or not legally I'm able to do with it. And the other thing I had to consider was websites. You know, one day a website is there, another minute it could be gone, depending on the situation. So we always tell students, make sure your website's links work when you submit assignments. We have to do the same for this. And depending how many links you have, that can take a while, especially when you're about to submit it. So the adoption process is, whoops, let me see if I can do this here to make it easier. Yeah. So the adoption process is an 11-step process at PACE. Once you have the document, you have like the tag words or the keywords that will be cataloged as, and then the permission forms get filled out. And then you can choose the Creative Commons license. When I did mine, they had mine set for me, but now as we move forward, since I am on the OER team at Pace University now, I'm part of the team, we give them choices, but when I did mine, there was no choice. They just assigned me one. Yes. Yes, Chadia. Go ahead.
Would you like to share your PowerPoint with us?
Oh, it's not sharing?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was sharing. I'm sorry about that.
It's only me. I think.
No, it may. I thought I was sharing it. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that.
Because I know that you prefer the great one, and I can't see it now.
No, okay. Maybe I think I changed the screen. That's why. Can you see it now? Okay, sorry about that. I changed the screen.
Sorry.
Oops. Okay. All right. So, and then, the project is submitted to the chair, which is then gets checked, and then it goes through all the changes back and forth, and then it can finally get cataloged in different places. So PACE puts it in a number of places: the Digital Commons, Merlot, Open Textbook Library, OTL, and Oasis. So it gets put in a number of places. So it's out there for a lot of people to see. It's not just for Pace University. That's the process of when we submit something, especially a textbook. My content is all about current news, personal branding, and making everything, and it has to be multimedia. That's the way I choose my content. So for me, I could not choose an article from the New York Times for the content for instruction because that would not be free and open to everybody. That's part of, even though it's open access to the students, it's not OER. So for the instruction part of my textbook, which I will show you later, I had to make the instruction all me, and for the assignments, I could make links to other things. I separated the two for that reason. So, and this is where this free and accessibility comes in. Everything has to be free and accessible. And that's, so it was a challenge at first, how to do that. But it was a fun challenge. So the documents that I used, and I'm going to categorize these in different documents, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but these are the main ones that I use. So for technical and government documents, and I do, since I also teach business writing, a lot of my composition classes turn into business writing classes. Pace University gives us a lot of freedom, and I take great advantage of that, and I turn my class into a business writing class in many ways for that reason. So if I'm using technical or government documents, the NAS, or the National Academy of Sciences, is a great place to go. There are free stuff there, and there's stuff you have to pay for, but the PDFs are free. A lot of technical reports are there. And these are all great. This slide is all about primary sources. Then, of course, government documents are primary sources, and you have, these are the two places that I go to if I want technical documents, especially policies or something like that. And, you know, a lot of these are PDFs. A lot of these are PDFs. So, you know, everything here is very easily accessible. Textbooks. There are many places to get textbooks for free. Perusal, Oasis, OpenStax, Open Textbook Library. There's plenty of other places, but these are some of the main ones. And the nice thing with some of these are, especially like say Perusal, there's something called social reading. And social reading is where you can type in any text and into a box, and you can actually have a conversation with the students, and they're able to take everything there, and they can make comments about the whole document and have a whole conversation about it. Perusal lets you do that. A lot of these sites will also let you, you know, that will have videos, audio recordings. Some will give you lecture notes, student presentations, student papers. Some of them will do that as well. So you don't always have to create your own textbook. You can use parts of these as well. So there are a whole lot of places I can go for textbooks. And if I just want chapters on something, the majority of these textbooks are going to be introductory materials. The majority of them. Very few OER textbooks are for more upper level, advanced, and mid-level classes. Minus an economics one called Core Econ, which will give you a full range of levels of economics. And that's the most widely used OER econ textbook. That's OER. Okay, so that's some of these. Now, videos and podcasts. TED Talks have been mentioned, National Public Radio, PBS NewsHour, YouTube videos. There's LinkedIn Learning. Then there's other sites like New Jersey OER, and the presentation that we just had, like Open Oregon Educational Resources, kind of like New Jersey OER, Connect NY. I think most states have one. And these are great places, and you get more than you get the whole course in a lot of these cases. For example, MIT OpenCourseWare or MIT OCW gives you the whole course for free. And of course, you're paying what $60,000 to go to MIT, and they give the course for free. But what you don't get if you're not an MIT student is the conversation, as the dean put it at an OER conference last week. So what they're paying for is the conversation. Everybody gets everything else. And I give students the assignment where they can go to any one of these sites on these slides, and they create resources for our assignments. And what we do is once they have them, they put them in Google Docs, they send them to me, and they do this in groups. I go through them, categorize them, and then the next class, we talk about them. So not only are they creating bibliographies, they are actually helping each other out at the same time, where they see they have a topic that they couldn't find a resource, somebody else found a resource for them, and they have conversations about it. So where I take a step back and moderate, and they do all the talking. So there are lots of things you can do with these things, with these websites. It's not just getting resources. You can actually have them interact with the resources at the same time. And this is a great way for students to get to know each other, a great way for students to help each other, and it's a great way for students to bond together at the same time. And you don't have to do anything. The students do all this. All you have to do is moderate it. My favorite one is MIT OpenCourseWare, because it has everything. If you go to it and just go to any one of the courses, you will see student presentations, student sample student papers. You will see their class videos on there, to everything. Some of them even put class lecture notes on there, PowerPoints, everything. So MIT gives you the whole thing. This is my favorite place. But they're all good, but I like MIT's the best. If I'm going to try to go for a textbook, I'm going to try here first, because they have a lot of things to go with that. The other one is Merlot. Okay, and all of these actually on here are like from TED Talks all the way to MIT. You don't need to sign up. You just go to the site, you can use it. Like LinkedIn Learning, you believe you have to sign up for, but the other ones here, you don't have to. With the textbooks, a lot of these places you have to sign up for first. National Academy of Sciences, I believe you have to sign up for. No, I'm sorry, you don't have to sign up for. They'll make you sign up afterwards, but you do have access to the PDFs. So some of these you have to sign up to get them, but they are free. You don't have to pay anything. Other ones you have to sign up for. When I do it in class, I use mostly these right here on this slide, because there's no sign up. You can just go to it and just use it. So for class time, it makes it much easier to do it this way. Merlot is kind of like a melting pot of things, because it has everything from syllabi to activities to bibliographies that you can create, that students can create. And Merlot has 30% of the members are students in themselves. So it's not just faculty, it's students as well on there. And you can create, and people can create bibliographies on there for everyone to see. There's student works that are on there. There's they can create e-portfolios on there as well. There's a whole range of assignments on here as well that you can see and view, but you have to sign up in advance for it. But it's all free. Okay, so what am I doing for time? 11:20. All right, so I'm going to skip the Creative Commons here because we've already talked about that. But I do want to mention, though, I mean, there are 7 licenses. And whenever you do want to use an OER text of any kind, you do have to see what the license says, because you can get into a lot of trouble if you don't. And, you know, so there's least freedom to the most freedom, but you do want to make sure what the licenses mean and all that. There's a 10-week course you can take on this. Being on the OER team, I've learned a lot about this I did not know before. And these slides, actually the whole presentation is available to you, but these slides were created by one of our members, one of the members on the committee for the OER team. I'm the only member who's not a librarian on the OER team. So I've had the pleasure of learning a lot about the behind the scenes thing, the way it's cataloged and everything, which I would have never known before if I did not become a member of the team, which has been an extremely valuable lesson for me. Okay, so it's always possible to go with public. The best way is always public domain if it's available. Then you have the other licenses, but you know, since these have been talked about, I'm not going to go into these too much, but you do want to be very careful how you do it. So my texts focus on branding, audience, focusing on describing your audience and current news. The assignments, I could talk about the databases, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, what have you, but I could not put them in the actual content, the instruction for the OER, because it's not OER, even though it's open access. So I had to be very, very careful with that. And I was made and a couple of times the librarians caught that I did something and I had to change it. So it was not accepted right away for that reason. So you want to be careful of what is truly free and what is not truly free. The students are paying for the databases. Yes, that's why they have access, but the public does not have access to it. So there's a huge difference with that. Then I use multimedia platforms. Oops. So I use a lot of videos, different platforms like Merlot. We use ePortfolio. We use a lot of different things just to make it more interesting for students. It's not just writing an essay in Microsoft Word. And the student engagement part is probably, I think, the most important part. Students can read it, it's fine, but it's not necessarily interesting to them. The more you involve the students in it, the more they're going to find it interesting. And one of the assignments I do is have them go to Merlot. They interact with it. They create their own bibliographies, and that's actually for a grade. So they actually have to take ownership as they do it, because the whole Merlot community can see it. Okay, and what are the benefits? Textbooks are expensive. You know, some textbooks can be almost $200. And that's probably the main reason we use OER. But if any of you were at the MIT's 20th birthday, which was, when was it? It was this week, actually. One of the professors there said it's the responsibility of the professor. It's not just about making it free for students. It's a teacher's responsibility. Professors, teachers have the responsibility to give them quality materials that they can easily access. One of the reasons students don't buy a textbook is it's just too expensive. They can't buy it. And sometimes they have to drop out of a course or they don't do well for that reason. And that's one of the reasons why PACE, starting either next semester or the semester after, is going to designate courses as low cost or no cost. They're not going to call it OER, they're going to call it low cost or no cost in the course description when they look at it, when they start scheduling for classes for that reason. We actually got it, we submitted a proposal for that as part of the OER team, and we actually got approval for it. So students can actually see that before they even take the classes. So they already know ahead of time. So if you're not using your own textbook, if you're having the students buy a textbook and you are not using the majority of it, you're not benefiting the student. So the way I see it, there are two choices. One, you can create your own, or you can adopt and adapt with an existing one. It's a better fit for the teacher, especially if you create your own, because you can do, that's you. The problem with me was I always had to use a book. That wasn't me. And it was just a little awkward for me to teach sometimes for that reason. So if students have these materials that are low cost and you use the materials, they're happy. And that leads to happy evaluations at the end of the semester. And I think sounds obvious, but happy students recommend students to take the class. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like those sites where you can rate myprofessor.com. So we always want to make students happy. It's not just about the free materials, it's about that they have materials that they use. And that's what they want to see. So how do you give them that? Give them the opportunity to do that. You can create a text with a student. I do that with assignments all the time. Like for what I'm doing right now is with ePortfolio. I'm having the students, a whole section in the assignment for the students to put their experiences. What are their tips for students when they create their portfolios next semester? What suggestions do they have? What advice do they have for students? So, and they're actually going to become co-authors when I make it an OER document at the end of the semester. All they're going to do is they'll sign a legal form and their names will get on there as well as co-authors. So students have the opportunity, when you have this collaboration and you're creating this whole ecosystem for students to really benefit from. And another way is by having, as I said, having the students go to these sites, get resources and talk about them as a class, as a group, put them in break room, in one big break room and do it, and you just moderate it. And social reading, like using perusal. There are many ways you can involve students with it. And that is the best way to do it, using OER. It's not just having them read it, getting them involved in OER. The more they do that, the more they're going to want to use OER, and they will embrace it more, and they will find it more useful for them. So what I'm going to do now is take you to paste this site for OER. And this is, this is where everyone has access to. And you can go here and you can look at any of these books you want. My textbook is here as well that I wrote. And 48% or 6% of the faculty are familiar with OER. 13% of instructors have required OER. Textbooks are about $1,200 a semester for students. It's not, so more faculty are going to OER, but there's still a lot who do not do that. And our goal as part of the OER team is, to get faculty to use more OER texts. And we do this by giving them grants. We just got another $10,000 grant we can offer faculty members. Giving professors a stipend to write book reviews on OER texts is another thing that we do. So we do things like that. We also encourage professors not to just write a textbook, but to put their syllabi, to put their assignments as OER texts. So we do a number of things to try to get faculty involved. But one of the easiest ways, offer faculty money. And we've been able to do that. And it's pretty effective, when money is involved. So this is my OER text. You can see here, it tells you how many downloads, it gives you the CC license and all of that here. And most, I think, universities and sites do something very similar, but this is what it looks like, at least for us. And oops, I know there's another one here. Okay, whoops. And then it also can give you like different statistics. And I was trying to find one with a map of different places in the world where people have accessed it, which it actually does give you, but I wasn't able to find that for this one for some reason. Some statistics are misleading like this, but you can see the number of downloads and the number of abstract views. It's a great gauge. But this is my experience with it. I've been on both sides, from the OER team side and from creating one. And it's an enriching experience. And the more we can, the more we can use OER materials, the more we can help students save money and do better in their classes. Okay, so that is my presentation. If you have any questions, I am happy to take them, and I do appreciate you coming and listening.
Yay, Stephen, thank you so very much. I especially appreciated you reminding us that OER seeks to address social justice issues in education. That was an important takeaway for me from your presentation. So let's open things up. Who has some questions for Steve? And because we do have a lot of time for questions, maybe let's do this. Steve, let's directly open the floor up to questions for you. And then I also want to make sure that we have some time for questions as well for our earlier presenters. There we go. Okay, I think I put a stop to that. All right. So if no one's going to ask questions, I'm going to ask questions. Okay. So let me warn you. So Steve, let me ask you the first question. Some of us, because of the pandemic situation, and because some of us work with Chinese students, as you do, some of us will be teaching Chinese students who will be in China this coming fall. And I'm wondering if you know whether some of these open educational resource materials are freely available in China, or if some of them seem to be blocked by the Great Firewall.
That's a good question, and I don't think you can answer that 100%. I what I do is I offer students what I always give students my WeChat, my WhatsApp, so students can always contact me if they can't access it, and then I will work with them. Because there's no way, I don't think there's any way of truly knowing unless you're in China. For some things, some things we do know, like Facebook and other things might not be available. But for some of these other resources, it's kind of hard to tell because with the Trump presidency, it's kind of changed a little bit with the relationship with universities. And so I always give them my social media information, and I let, if they can't do it, I always work with them. But it's a good question. I don't think we can ever address that completely.
All right, how about some more questions for Steve? You can either unmute yourself or type them in the chat box. Oh, and Nancy, I see your chat message. Anecdotally, my student in China last year did access my course, but she constantly had internet issues. Yes, yes. I think any of us who've worked with students in China are familiar with that. Yes. All right. Steve, I really appreciated the cornucopia of sites that you referred us to as well. And one of our participants, Nancy, had asked whether, in the spirit of open resources, you'll be sharing your slides.
Yes,
As
I
understand,
did
we'll
give
be sharing them.
Jim I did send Jim my presentation, actually. I'm not sure, he said he was gonna put it in the chat, but I don't, when I emailed him, so I don't know if he did that yet.
He will be coming back in shortly. He
Oh,
had to
okay.
leave and go on another call, but when he comes back, I'll ask him to go
Okay.
ahead and do that. So hopefully he will appear soon, before we all say good night or good morning, as the case may be. All right, some more questions for Steve. I'm sure many of us had some ideas as we were listening to his and our three colleagues' earlier presentations. My mind has been working 1,000 miles a minute, and I'm already thinking of how I might be able to incorporate many of your ideas. Let's see. Eric asks, do you ever have students come to you for help understanding open methods, i.e. co-creating materials and sharing out? And what kind of support do you offer?
I always, at the beginning, since my class is OER based materials, I always have students, I always give the lecture the first day of what is OER and open access. And I not only do that, I give them the PACE site where they can get the textbook, and we move on from there. But I always tell them the textbook is always being reworked, and they can always be co-presenters on it if they want it to be, or co-authors. So I kind of, that's the way I kind of do it. Certain assignments, like my ePortfolio assignment, which Pace University has not really embraced ePortfolio as much as other universities have. I've had my students give their perspective on it, and I put that as an OER document, which we're going to be publishing by the end of the semester. So that's kind of what I do for my methods. They're not really high tech, but that's what I do.
Bessie asks a related question. Bessie, go ahead and follow up on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to know more about who your students are that are participating in the publication. Tell us more about,
they're students, mainly from, mainly they're domestic students, because our ESL classes are strictly online. Although I do offer the ESL students to help co-author, the majority of them do not do that. They don't accept it in most cases. I think it's because of they feel their English is not good enough. But I tell them, listen, we can always worry about the English later. Get what you want to say down first. We can always talk about that later. But I feel that they think that their English has to be good enough to do that. And I think that's why they don't do that.
These are students in your writing classes. Are these undergraduate students?
Undergraduate students.
Okay. That's good to know, to get them involved early.
I've learned this from different OER. I've been to 2 OER conferences in the last 2 weeks.
Mhm.
This is my third this is my third one, and I'll be doing another OER conference next week as well. A presentation to PACE. So I mean, one of the things that I've learned from these conferences is that you involve students, and there's a whole ecosystem. There's 3 layers: a single, double, and multi-layered ecosystem. The single layered is just a professor using it. Here, go ahead and read the material. The double layered is where the students kind of interact with it. And the third layer is when the university gets involved, and it creates a whole exchange of ideas.
So do you have all of those layers when you're producing your book, or?
I only have 2. The universities PACE is in between double and multi right now, where MIT is multi. They've been there for like 20 years. It's 20 years now for them. So they've been doing it. Since I've been to the OER where the dean actually spoke of OER spoke about it, and then at their birthday this week, they keep talking about this ecosystem. And it's the more if your university gets involved and professors get on board, everybody wins and everyone gets involved. Students benefit much more. And that's what we're trying to do at PACE, through grants and stipends for book reviews, things like that.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Nancy asked in the chat, are you seeing OER throughout ESOL, or is most of the OER you see in other disciplines? That's a great question.
It is. I don't see a lot in TESOL. I see a lot in other disciplines, but I don't see as much in TESOL. I've been to a couple of the conferences with Chatty has put together, but those have been the only ones I've really seen in TESOL. But I've never seen most of the stuff. I don't usually see in that we have access. I've not usually seen in TESOL. I think that should change, but I've never seen it in TESOL.
Yeah, I think all of our presenters today have been encouraging us to really help us up our game, as it were. So I hope these sessions have inspired all of us to think of how we can share and share alike. How about any questions for our earlier presenters, Eric, Luciana, Nancy? Does anyone have any questions that they might like to ask them? Thinking about what they shared about their green tea book that they've been working on. I might ask a question for our earlier presenters. I think all of us have really been struggling in so many ways to have students engage, especially in breakout rooms, let alone meet on their own. How did you navigate having students meet on their own? Do students report on each other about their participation or non-participation? Is it a required class activity? I was a little bit curious to know how you manage that that activity?
Sure. Yeah, it definitely was a challenge at the beginning. You know, as we were all climbing that really steep learning curve to learn Zoom, you know, instantly, basically, when we moved remote. The biggest hurdle was convincing the students that they could do it. And basically, once you got past that, it just steamrolled. And so what I would do is kind of watch. So my classes when remote were at least 50% synchronous. So I had a chance to engage a lot with students before assigning these group meetings, the student-led group meetings. But what I tried to do was sort of identify students who were a little more tech savvy. And so I would encourage them to be the facilitator of the group. They're happy to share their knowledge and sort of guide their group mates, particularly, you know, the smaller the group is. So they were, you know, it was student to student sharing, and then I wouldn't let them always be the facilitator. Everybody got a chance to do it throughout the term, at least once, but I was always there as a sort of that guide on the side for the tech pieces, because that's what students identified as the biggest challenges. And then when they reported, so they played group roles. And then the reporter would report back to the class the following week. And the only questions I wanted them to report about wasn't about the content, because I just wanted them to communicate. The reporting was what went well, what challenges did you face? And when students learned that everybody was facing similar challenges, everybody had the same kind of issues that they were working through and figuring out together and seeing success over time, that was really encouraging to them. And by the end of the course, my feedback was our group meetings were our favorite part of the class.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciated that. Any last questions for our three earlier presenters or for Steve this evening before we say good night or good morning? No. Okay.
I saw a good question in the chat. I think it's from
Oh, did I
Amanda.
miss?
I don't want to string this on too long, but it is, I think, a really important, especially in the spirit of professional development and connecting out, question about how did we decide to work together. And, you know, it's not an accident. Like, I've known Luciana not only from work, but from collaborating in Oregon TESOL. Same with Nancy. I think probably we probably met in another institution. But I remember when I talked to Nancy about, hey, so we're looking at this grant and we're looking at this project. It was at an OER TESOL board meeting. And she said, oh yeah, I developed this whole unit of OER for exactly this class already. And I said, oh yeah, okay, tell me more. So I think, you know, these kinds of networking events and collaborative events, they have knock-on effects, or like leading to more and more generating projects, identifying resources, like saying, hey, did you hear? You can, we could probably get paid for the work that you've already done. I mean, that's a huge thing, right? It's about opening doors for everybody.
And I would say that some of the challenges that Stephen brought up in his presentation were so much easier. Those obstacles were easier to overcome because we had three of us on the team working together. So I would say if you're looking at a project, that kind of collaboration makes the challenges of finding the resources that are, you know, openly sourced or accessible is going to be easier if you have more people working on the project.
All right, the power of networking. Thank you so much, Eric.